And away we go. And away we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome on this, what day is it today? It's the 25th of April, 2024. God damn, my chair is low. There we go. How you doing? Welcome on this Thursday. Not a whole lot going on in combat sports except the anticipation of better days to come. There were some great announcements this week, more on the boxing side, but some on the MMA side too. And then, of course, we're all still trying to process the craziness of last weekend. Certainly I am. When Ryan Garcia, very much for me, unexpectedly defeated Devin Haney, but certainly he did with great success. So we can talk about that. We can talk about any of the UFC's announcements. Anything you want to get to, it's your chat as much as it is mine. So thumbs up if you're watching. Hit subscribe. It doesn't cost you a thing. Couple of options if you want to get in on it. Obviously, I put up a thread the day before on the community tab here at youtube.com/Luke Thomas. You guys fill it up. We'll go for about an hour on those. But if you want to leave anything in the super chat, we'll get to the paid questions after the free portion of today's podcast. We'll go for about an hour, as I mentioned, on the free stuff. And of course, if you become a member at youtube.com/Luke Thomas/join, then you can contribute to the live chat on the paid portion for free. So there you go, among other benefits. All right. Very good. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We have a lot to get to. So without further ado, let's get this party started, shall we? All right, there we are, having a day. I've got my Chick-fil-A Coke Zero. It's very good, delicious, 0 calorie. Probably going to give me AIDS, but nevertheless, it'll be 0 calorie when it does. All right. I'm trying to think if there's anything else, any housekeeping notes. Folks have been asking, what about some of the interviews? The interview I did with Ivan Flores and then the live chat interview with Dan Hardy. I will put both of those up over the weekend. I'll put this one up tonight, and then I'll put those other ones up over the weekend. So I'll space it out a little bit more through the course of the weekend. You can get those there. Yeah? All right. Okay, without further ado, let me take this off, and then we'll get to some of these questions. Thanks to everyone who has joined. I greatly appreciate it. And I need to trim my beard as well. All right, here we are. Let's do it. Let's do it like this, though. Okay. Very first one. Can you explain why you took your yellow mustard rant off your YouTube channel? That video deserves to be in the Smithsonian for preservation. Might not be what you think. It's really not that complicated. There are times where, as I understand it, has been explained by people in the know on YouTube, if you have a video that's kind of hanging on in your library that is not really doing a lot of traffic by itself, it may not be a big deal, but if you have a bunch of videos that are idles that aren't really moving into units and are just kind of being dead weight, it can affect your channel's health. So we tend to cycle those out if we can. I can bring that one back. I don't think it was anyway intentional to take it down for any other purpose other than was it serving any kind of algorithmic benefit? But no, it was not. So, but I can put it back up. So don't worry about it. All right. Luke, I noticed that in his post-fight interview, Alex, I think you mean Pereira, did not call out Aspinall Jones or even a heavyweight championship fight. He merely asked for a fight at heavyweight. That being said, does a fight with him versus Gon make the most sense, especially if they book Blades versus Aspinall for Manchester? While Alex no doubt deserves a title shot, I recall Anderson Silva having non-title fights at 205 while being the champ at 185. Yes, he did go up and fight Forrest Griffin. He also fought Stephan Bonner, and I believe the James Irvin fight was 205, but it doesn't really matter. Also, how do you see that fight playing out? Do you see Yuri versus Ankalaev in the meantime? Yair fought the interim on the same night at Volk Moonlight at 155. Don't know about Yuri and Ankalaev. Yuri still got sights where he apparently wants to be champion at 205, then go down to 185. But you're asking about him having a fight at heavyweight. I really wouldn't mind it. The only thing that you can get kind of wishy-washy or weird, and it was a big risk with Anderson Silva too, where he was a champion at the time, and then he would go up a weight class, and then you just didn't know when it was going to happen. And then he styled on people like he did on Forrest Griffin. But I would be okay with it. I would absolutely be okay with it. And the issue becomes, if you take a bad beating up at that weight class, what does it do? I don't know how likely he is to take a bad beating. I would say if he were to get one, I don't know if Gon is necessarily the guy to deliver it, but a guy like Aspinall could. So I think a Gon fight makes a lot of sense. The problem is, of course, Gon is turning down fights for whatever movie he is shooting, and I'm not exactly sure what the timeline on that would be. So I don't know how available he is. I certainly would not match him up with a Jalton Almeida type. I don't think that fight serves a lot of purpose necessarily. So that would not be my first priority. I'm not sure who else. Blades. I think Blades and Aspinall running it back in Manchester makes a lot of sense. Very much looking forward to that fight. I'm okay with it. Yeah, I mean, listen, Griffin was a really tough challenge because he didn't have the athletic gifts that Silva did, but he was presumed, and he was, to be bigger and stronger. And of course, that is relevant. But Silva fought in a way that he made it completely irrelevant. When I say relevant, I mean as like a sort of a general condition of examination. Yeah. By the way, today is the NFL draft. Today is the NFL draft, a day when nobody knows what the fuck anyone's going to do, and no one knows if anyone's going to have success, at least depending on what the position might be. I've listened to enough sports radio to know that no one knows what their favorite team is going to do, and no one knows if what their favorite team is going to do will work out no matter what the option is. And it might be the case that the people who are running these teams have a feeling about what the success rate might be of who they're selecting. But if you actually look at the success rate of teams, and particularly with the Bears, but not exclusive to them, certainly my team, the Commanders, know better, hardly any better anyway. They don't really know either. Nobody seems to know exactly what will make for a successful transition between the college and the pros at the quarterback position. And it makes one wonder, like, what the purpose is of talent evaluation if nobody can get it right, even at the highest level. It's a good question, right? I hope. Okay. Good question. Luke, UFC 304 is in Manchester. It will reportedly start at 3 a.m. local time. How come U.S. audiences don't purchase pay-per-views unless they are in the evening? Is this an afternoon card? Is an afternoon card that unwatchable? So folks have asked about this, how is it possible the UFC could have these fights in the Middle East, which are on either identical or at a bare minimum very similar time zones to what you would get out of Europe? I mean, they're not identical, but they're close to. They're not far apart on some of these time zones. And if that was the case, why couldn't you do something like that for the UK, where you could slightly adjust the time so that it'd be, afternoon, late evening, or early evening for them, or it'd be late evening for them, what we would consider to be normal fight time, anywhere between 10 to midnight, and then just have an afternoon card in the States. If they already do something roughly similar with shows in the UAE, why can't they do that in the UK? And the answer is they could. In theory, they could. They could do whatever they want. Obviously, they can pick and choose. But what I'm trying to point out is pay-per-view is not the significant revenue generator relative to the total proportion of income that they have. I should say the proportions have changed to what they they ordinarily would get. There's a lot more contracted revenue than there once was. So we know that that's been the case for some time, but it is still an important revenue driver. So they still have to respect it. The vast majority of pay-per-view buying audiences live in North America. So catering to those times is going to boost your fortunes. I have lived through the UFC trying to start UFC pay-per-views at 9, which they were worried about because that would mean that the pay-per-view main card would start at 6 p.m. on the West Coast, and they just didn't know if that was going to be a great thing. They immediately abandoned it. But again, it goes back to this question of, okay, fine, all that might be true, but they're doing it in the UAE. They have these afternoon shows. The one in Saudi Arabia coming up is a fight night, so it's not the same, but still, they're able to accommodate some of these time zones. Why can't they do it someplace else? My top guess on that is going to be that the site fees that they're getting in the UAE cover for any potential trade-off that they might be making in pay-per-view. You're simply not getting that out of the UK, right? You're getting, what was it, 25 million? I think what was the deal they had with the UAE? Something like that, 20 million plus for the ability to bring shows there to the UAE. So that is, you have such an enormous amount of guaranteed revenue just from that. You will still make money on pay-per-view. Obviously, you're going to now be featuring these fighters relevant to this geographic area, whether it's their religious faith or their nationality, in a way that caters to those local time zones. That actually makes a fair amount of sense. But if you're still trying to put on a pay-per-view and you are not getting those similar kinds of site fees, and so now you're much more reliant on what you're going to get at the gate and what you're going to actually draw from the pay-per-view box office, so to speak, then they're going to do that in that particular way. I mean, I don't quite get it either. I don't like British. I don't know what to tell folks. It's the same thing with the ticket prices. People want to tell me all the time about the benefits of MMA being under a single umbrella and having one place that does it, and everything is neat and orderly and tidy. You don't have any sanctioning bodies coming in and messing everything up, and multiple weight classes and bridger weight that. And I certainly understand that argument. I do think there's a fair amount of validity to it. But the other side of it, of course, is that if you have a single dominant firm that has basically totally controlled the industry, they're just going to seek ways to extract revenue and value out of that existing relationship rather than returning value. If people aren't going to in any way, or at a bare minimum, if what they sell at the box office is not going to suffer in any kind of meaningful way, why would they change this? And, you know, you ask people in Manchester, they all seem to believe that this is going to sell out in a day. Well, dude, why wouldn't you do it? You still get all of your North American revenue. The folks locally, there appear to be some people very upset about it, which I understand, but there's really no effort at any kind of economic boycott or economic raising awareness of anything that's happening. I mean, anything at all. No. So if there's going to be nothing if there's no pushback in the market, I just don't understand what folks expect UFC to do. So if you have a feeling about it that you don't like, by all means, continue to feel that. If you don't want to purchase it under the price or the time or anything else, I get it. But it's not like it's not like the industry is open enough where someone else can fill this need for you in a way without without resorting to these kinds of practices. And also for people who are like, oh, well, the UFC is, I've seen this before, people saying things like, oh, the UFC is a global company. It certainly has a global reach. That is true, but it's an American company. And this tells you it's an American company. They're catering, not just North American, so the Canadian audiences too, but they're catering basically to the American pay-per-view buying public here. That's really what the core of this is designed to facilitate. I just don't know what to tell you. Like, there's not a lot of choices. People continue to eagerly buy this stuff and show up for it and watch it and pay for it. You're not in any way giving the company not this person you, but the proverbial you. You're not giving the company any kind of feedback in any kind of way that would make them second guess doing this. I just don't know what to say. And people who might be like, well, it's scalpers who are buying this, or, you know, these are not going to hardcore fans. That's a fair point as well. But again, if this one company essentially controls this end of the market almost in full, right, the pay-per-view end of the market, there's really no other company that could compete with them, at least at a bare minimum, in the pay-per-view space. If they've got this entire thing on lock and you're an MMA fan, it's not that you have to buy these things, but the people keep doing it. I don't know what folks want to happen. And by the way, someone says, living in Sweden, I'm happy as long as the fights aren't in the middle of the night. They did this in Sweden for those shows, not all the Swedish shows, but some of the ones that aired at the same time on Fox in the United States. They had those guys up till 4 or 5 in the morning as well. So all I can tell folks is you have to vote with your dollars. You have to vote with your time. Reading what the votes are, there are still a huge amount of MMA fans that are perfectly willing to live under these conditions. I don't know if they could do that very often. I don't know if they could do it all the time. I don't know if they could do that with every kind of card. But with what fans think they're going to get at this time for a pay-per-view on this day, looks like they think that's going to be a great thing. So I just don't know what to tell folks. I really don't. It sucks. I feel for you. Luke, any chance you and BC could repeat the exercise you did at SiriusXM where you divided 155 and 170 roster and formed a 165-pound weight class? Would love to. Only this time with the current roster. Also, I've never been a big TJ Dillashaw fan, but he has been on Rampage's podcast a lot lately, and his breakdowns are excellent. Yeah, I believe that. He says almost Dan Hardy, Luke Thomas. Was wondering if you'd consider having him as the live chat guest. I don't know if he likes me that much after some of my comments I made regarding his injury situation heading into the Aljamain Sterling fight. I do hope he is healing. You'll remember at the time that I said, when he got injured basically almost right away, and then you find out his arm was like falling out multiple times in camps, and I'm like, dude, people are paying money to watch you fight. If you're that injured, again, it's not fraud. That's not what I'm saying, but it's negligent to the point where it's borderline. Like if you're that banged up, you cannot fight. Your chance of winning is infinitesimally small. It's not realistic. You need to withdraw, but he didn't, and so I made those comments. I don't think he loved him too much, which is his right, but that might preclude me from guest booking in the future. You know what I mean? What's more likely, Conor winning 2 fights in a row? So he hasn't since 2016, or Dustin getting the belt on his 3rd attempt? Jesus, that's a good question. Fuck me. What is more likely? Conor winning 2 fights in a row, or Dustin getting a belt on his 3rd try? Okay, so that we know for a fact that means Dustin versus Islam, right? The fight that's coming up. We don't know what that would mean for Conor. That means he would have to beat Chandler and then somebody else. Because they could soft pedal the matchmaking, I could say, oh man, probably Dustin, because he does have a tremendous shot. He is an experienced veteran. He is, to your point, he has failed, but he has been here before at this level. He understands what it takes to compete at the elite level. One shot can change the entire direction of a fight. That's not the only lesson you take from the Ryan Garcia fight over Devin Haney. There are many, many more. But certainly when you get a puncher like that, you really have to respect it. So I would say Dustin. At the same time, that's not me telling you that, like, Conor's really got no chance of winning 2 in a row. It would really depend on the matchmaking. It would really depend on the weight class. It would depend on a number of different factors. Golly, for that reason, I don't know if I'm saying some bullshit. That's a great question. 2 in a row. Fuck, man. Yeah, I'll stick with Dustin. That's a tough one. That's a really tough one. Let's see here. Here we go. If Ryan mostly faked, I'm a Garcia, mostly faked, not fully, but let's posit somewhat, faked the craziness to skew the betting odds against him in order to bet on himself and getting a bigger payday. How is it legal? I'm not sure what law he's breaking. He's not breaking any Golden Boy corporate statute. Betting on yourself to win and then going and giving a full-throated effort is not illegal. Now, I think it gets kind of different if you were betting on yourself and then you lost and you purposely bet yourself to lose, where you're like, there's a concerns about your throwing the outcome. But like betting on yourself to do the right job, to accomplish the goal, what you would do no matter what, now you're just betting on yourself to do it. Like, in other words, you haven't changed. The bet doesn't change the incentive structure that normally exists. Normally, he has an incentive to go out there and want to win and perform his best. We all know that can vary time to time, but it doesn't really change the incentive structure. Betting on yourself in a parlay to not go past 9, and you're not a knockout threat or something, and then you throw it or whatever. Acting in some kind of way where you're trying to get a very specific outcome, right? A very highly prop bet kind of specific outcome, or at a bare minimum, betting against what would be natural for you to act as a consumer or as a competitor, that can, I think, get you into trouble at any kind of betting statute. But just straight up betting on yourself, this is not necessarily illegal. It just typically would run afoul of any kind, if you're in the Major League Baseball league protocol or in the UFC, any kind of UFC protocol and kind of rules they might have with their bettors. But it doesn't by itself, it's not by itself illegal. Look, if Dustin beats Islam, but as a competitive fight, has Islam had enough defenses to warrant an immediate rematch? That's very debatable. But you say it's competitive. The answer is yes. So in fights where like guys have lost, like Charles Oliveira just got, like he didn't do much to Islam in that fight. Was not in favor of an immediate rematch. Volk, as good as he was, getting finished off by Ilya. Wouldn't mind if they ran that one back, but because he got finished off, it makes the debate a little bit tougher. If someone loses and the fight is still very competitive, that typically means that you have some cause to run it back, particularly if it could be economically viable, which I do think a rematch between them could be economically viable, unless Conor McGregor wins against Chandler. He wants the next title shot. UFC just wants to facilitate that. They could put him in there as well. So you're asking, how long were they a champion? How did they lose, if that's what is you're positing? And then what other options does the UFC have that they could pivot to that could be better? You're weighing kind of all of those factors at once. It's not really just if they win or lose, or if they win or lose competitively, but the options that exist as well. All right, here we go. Luke, not really a question, but I was watching back Garcia versus Haney last night, and during the middle rounds that Haney won, so like 2-5, 2-6, he was actually doing really well. That is true. People haven't given him enough credit for the feinting and overall boxing ability he showed after being stunned in round 1. I don't know if that's totally true, but okay. All that to say, Garcia made great adjustments after he saw Haney dipping to the left hook. If you look in the 7th round, Garcia actually threw 3 left hooks in a row at the start to condition Haney to the tempo. He then proceeded to throw a 1-2 times in a row. He throw a 1-2 2 times in a row a bit later. The knockdown came because Haney was expecting a third 1-2, but instead a left hook looped around. Overall, just fantastic boxing ability from Garcia. I mean, I guess I'd make 2 points about that. In terms of Haney not getting credit, well, did you guys see he got dropped completely from the Ring Magazine's pound-for-pound rankings? I think he was sitting inside the top 5. He got dropped completely. I don't think that's unfair. I think if you're ranked inside the top 5 pound-for-pound and then you lose to a guy, granted, maybe you lost to a guy that many, many people had improperly underrated, but in terms of what pound-for-pound placement is a function of what you have achieved. And prior to the Haney fight, Garcia's best wins just could not put him in that conversation. Haney's, turns out in theory, could, but there may have been a little bit of a bubble there. So Haney, a pound-for-pound ranked guy, loses to a non-pound-for-pound guy, you have to get dropped from that. And like, not only just lost, but lost like terribly. Yes, you have to get removed from the pound-for-pound rankings for an infraction like that. I totally agree with that. In terms of how he performed, yes, he gets rattled in the first, not dropped, proceeds to win the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. So I thought he won those no problem. 6 is debatable. Certainly at the 7th and on is where the entire fight collapses for him. But in those first 6 rounds, he basically does pretty well. He certainly wins it. And to your point, he showed good boxing ability and began to really work with the jab. The jab became more consistent. He began to build it. This is where I think in the 2nd or maybe 3rd round, that's where he had the dip and then the jumping left, almost like the gazelle punch, the leaping left hook that stunned Garcia. That was one of the best single punch that he landed in the entire fight. Yes, when he was doing that, that's true. I do think that was, he showed you that he could overcome being rattled early. He could, at least for a time, stick to the game plan. But the problem was he was still basically vulnerable in the exact same ways. Not the exact same openings, but look at the opening in the first round. It was one that Garcia took advantage of, but he didn't necessarily create. There's a debate about how creative he was in bringing that about, but he didn't fully create it. In some of the subsequent ones, it was Garcia creating the openings. And that to me is a big difference. And then adjusting, as you pointed out, through the course of that fight, I just did not see him necessarily being able to do that. Certainly not at the elevated level at which he did. Like totally missed that one coming. And so the Garcia component here, I think everyone is recognizing. People got bitter at me on some of these posts that we did on Instagram because I was like, yeah, I think Devin Haney's stock was somewhat inflated, especially by people like me, and that coming down to earth is kind of important. And people were like, oh, you're blaming Devin now rather than giving Ryan his respect. That's really not true. I am definitely giving Ryan Garcia his respect, but even by Ryan Garcia's own admission, he fought in spurts, didn't have the cardio to go 12, and was drinking through the camp. What everyone wants to make about the weight, even Garcia is telling you he was not fighting necessarily at his best. That doesn't mean he didn't fight well when he chose to fight, but he didn't have the stamina to really give a full-throated effort over the course of 12 rounds. That's just a reality. And again, if you're a pound-for-pound guy and you lose badly to a non-pound for pound guy, where you can even argue that fight probably should not have gone past the 10th, and but for referee Harvey Dock, it would not have. So you narrowly avoided getting stopped. It showed me he's got incredible heart and phenomenal physical conditioning, but he was badly outgunned. Dude, you deserve to pay a penalty for that. If you're a pound for pound guy and you're losing to somebody who's not, and you lost badly, there's a penalty with that. And I think, I went back and I looked at Boxing Gems' post-fight breakdowns for not this one, but for Lomachenko versus Haney, and then Haney versus Linares, and what they had to say. And dude, they were pointing out some of the very things Garcia took advantage of right after those fights, or even before them too, actually, in their previews and their post-fight analysis. Like, they had really gone through and they had seen, so not just the dropping of the hand on the hook side, but more than that, rolling and squaring, the whole 9 yards. They had pointed out, and it was just Garcia who took advantage of it in ways that these other guys simply could not. So did Garcia elevate himself? There can be no doubt. There can be no doubt. But was Haney's elevated status not merely questioned here by virtue of the loss itself, but like what the loss says, and whether or not we had, or not merely a question of should he hold the same position, but that in downgrading whatever position that he holds, are we right to do that based on some of these other broader issues that we did not, certainly in my case, give fuller consideration to before the fight? I just don't see how you can say. I don't see how you can say that Haney was not unprepared. He was definitely prepared, but that the things that had not cost him, that were widely noticed, again, not by idiots like me, but certainly by others, that people had flagged as potential issues that just didn't come up. And then here's a guy who can make them come up because he raises his game. It is both. So I'm happy to give him credit for the dog he's got. He is a good fighter. He does have real talent, and also 25 years of age. There is still, I think he should take some time off, but there is still plenty of time for him to get some big-time elite wins. I'm not discounting that. But you have to suffer a penalty by the nature of the loss, and then the nature of the loss has to should make us ask questions about to what extent we were fairly evaluating this thing ahead of time. At least that's the lesson I'm going to take. Everyone's going to take different ones, but that's the one that I have to come back to. All right, here we go. Luke, what do you think of Jamahal Hill making such a quick turnaround against a dangerous Khalil Roundtree? I don't love it, to be honest. On the one hand, this person writes, I've heard the argument that Pereira was flatlined by Izzy, returned 3 months later against Blachowicz, and seemed fine. I've argued that the context of Pereira moving up 20 pounds and Jan already gassing by the time they traded headshots was important to note. On the other hand, Marlon Moraes made the same turnaround between Sandhagen and Font and seemingly completely lost his chin. I would say that starting with a Cejudo performance is when you really begin to see the degradation in his ability to take punishment. But okay, I know what Hill suffered wasn't the worst KO imaginable, but the long-term risks of this move are scary, especially in a division where KO power is not uncommon. Yeah, I don't love it for him. Again, having come off an all-time whopper of a miss, I'm going to try to still be respectful about the chances of either fighter in this case. So this idea that Jamahal Hill couldn't beat Khalil Roundtree, that's not the argument that I'm making, or that he won't. That's not really the argument that I'm making either. But rather, the question would be, do we have cause for concern? Legitimate, reasonable cause for concern. We do. For starters, it turns out that he signed an agreement for this fight, I think about a week after he had lost at UFC 300. At least that's what he told the Schmo. So first of all, it's like, I'm guessing the UFC has worked this all out in private with the Athletic Commission, and the Athletic Commission in Nevada still releases medical suspensions for boxers, but they don't do it for MMA fighters anymore. I don't quite know what the story is there, other than, these if there's anyone out there laboring under the delusion that the commissions genuinely have fighter interests at the center of what they do, you're a fucking moron. Okay, you're just a moron of epic proportion. Or you're not a moron and you're just cynically okay with lying to the public. It really would depend. But in either case, it's not transparent. They cannot break the law if whatever's on the books has to be obeyed. It's just that we can't see what's on the books. But nevertheless, like doing that in general, even if you can get medically cleared within the available timelines, just it makes one nervous. And the thing that I come back to is a little bit of this Volkanovski thing. He is hardly the first or the last fighter that has suffered from something like this, which is you had a fight where in certain cases, they feel like they were robbed and it was a close competitive fight. But in other ones, you'll see it where they lose and they lose quite badly. And the first thing that they want to do is not take time to slow down and be like, diagnose it. They feel like, they got me. Should not have happened this way. It was a bit of an accident. It definitely won't happen twice. Even if it's not with the same person, just it won't happen again. I want to get back and put this feeling behind me, right? The last feeling that you have is what comes from the last fight that you have. And if you're just stewing on a bad loss, it can eat at these guys. They live and die in their own minds. It can really eat at them and be a disaster for them, right? So they want to push that out of the way. They want to go do something else. And I can understand that. It would be a very common reaction that you would get from fighters. And again, he might be able to do it in a way where it is okay with whatever medical suspensions the commission, the relevant one here in Nevada, would have given him. But I don't know if it actually bodes well for his ultimate chances at victory. Again, he is a big-time puncher. He was game for that contest against Pereira. I think overmatched in the end, it turned out, but certainly game for it. I think he'll be game for the one with Khalil Roundtree. Khalil Roundtree, I think, has a guy who's had some ups and downs. More recently, a lot more ups. Seems to have really understood his purpose, has his own style, is vicious and violent, and will trade. And so it is still very coin-tossy. But yes, the nature of just trying to put a bad loss behind you by accepting another one very quickly, fighters, not always, but often compound their problems when they do that. We shall see what happens with him. I'm also co-main event, by the way. Co-main event. So there you have it. What's kind of interesting is he accepted the 300 fight basically on short notice, right? It was like they offered it to him, and he signed it the next day, and it was like a month before that fight happened. This one he kind of took on. Granted, he had just come from a camp, sort of, but he kind of took this one on short notice too, rather than like stopping and be like, "I'll be back last quarter of 2024." He was like right back on it. So I don't want to be the guy who doesn't take Jamahal Hill seriously, and I'm taking him seriously, but at the same time, don't love the nature of the acceptance. Plenty of questions to ask about whether that will backfire. Yeah, so here we go. LT, since UFC 304 is in Manchester and the main card is meant to begin at 11 p.m. and probably end at 6 a.m. local time, what are your thoughts on the impact this will have on the fighters? Will the UK fighters be disadvantaged? Everyone is going to be disadvantaged in circumstances like this. Like this is, guys, who does this advantage? Very basic question. By putting these fights, prelim starting at 11 p.m., main card at 3 a.m., who is being advantaged? You might say, oh, well, the American consumers. Right, but that's not the answer either. It's the UFC. Like, if the UFC had to negotiate with a fighter as like an A side, do you fucking think they would agree to this? No chance. There's no one who looks at this. If you're a trainer, a coach, a physio, anybody in that chain of custody who takes care of a fighter's well-being and your job is to optimize their readiness and health for combat on that day, no one looks at this and goes, that is fucking perfect. Nobody does that because it's suboptimal for everybody, including the local fans, just not for the UFC, because this is the way they can make the most amount of money, right? Is by organizing the product in this particular way. So they're the ones who are not being disadvantaged, although certainly it'll be difficult for all of them to be putting on a fight at this time as well. What I have seen fighters do in this one and in other cases where the timing could be weird. Remember, we had some weird times at Fight Island as well, where they were a little bit odd in terms of what time in the morning that they were and how fighters had to adapt to it. You basically need to find out like as quick as you possibly can if you're going to be fighting on this card, because what you have to do is you now need to tailor your schedule and your sleep so that your max production window is whatever time of the morning you are, or late evening, depending if you're first on the card, excuse me. You have to optimize your sleep and your wake up schedule and your workout schedule such that by whatever fight time you have, you are now optimized around that. And I've seen fighters really change up what time they go to bed, what time they get up, what time they train in order to facilitate that. Now, usually they do it for a time where it's like, I'll be fighting at midnight. So, I mean, think about that. Like, what time do you mostly exercise? I mostly exercise either first early in the morning, usually at the very latest, early afternoon. There are times where I have to work out, where the sun is going down. So let's say 6-ish, 7-ish, around that time. I don't like working out much past that. I don't really get the most out of it. Imagine I had to get the most out of it at midnight. Again, you could do it, but you're talking about having to adjust your schedule in a way to perform at a very odd and unusual hour. You will get trade-offs from this, by the way. I don't think every fighter on this card, win or lose, is going to be able to optimize their schedule in such a way where they can really get the max out of themselves fighting at 5 a.m. That is a big ask. That's not easy to do. That can be very, very difficult. So the best ones will begin now and start arranging their life in a way where they'll be ready to rock at that time. I think I've answered this one before, but we can try it. What's your thoughts on the new rumored 165 division? What would be your dream matchup from 155er that goes up to face a 70er that goes down? I've said this before. I think Colby could make 165, and then you could have Islam go up. You could have like a Chiesa go down. Well, I don't know if you can go down anymore. I don't know if you can go down. That's a little more difficult to say. But yeah, I definitely think Colby could make it. He's a tweener for sure. You could have Poirier go up. Shit, Poirier could fight Colby at 165. That'd be a hell of a fight too. I would love to do another draft. I'm glad that someone brought that idea up. I would love to do that. Let's see here. Hang on one second. I gotta. All right. Let's see. Okay. All right. Again, UFC 304 in Manchester is reportedly going to be prime time for U.S. viewers, so those in attendance in the UK and European viewers will have to stay awake. Does UFC seriously think inconveniencing the already... So glad you asked this. Look at this question. Does the UFC seriously think inconveniencing the already deprived market is worth pay-per-view buys? Yes. Yes. That is exactly what they think. And I bet you that they're right. In the sense of, should they be doing this? No. I mean, I feel bad for the people. Even the ones that have to pay all that money, I feel bad for the people that have to do that. You're asking, does the UFC seriously think inconveniencing the already deprived market is worth the pay-per-view buys? 1,000% they think that. They know that. They know that there's no penalty that they will pay for this. Not right now. Unless something changes with fan preferences, unless something changes with market dynamics, unless something changes within MMA itself, they know there won't be. There won't be. Oh, but Luke, so-and-so says they wouldn't do it. They might not. There are 50,000 people ready to replace them. I don't know what to. I mean, I'm not even trying to be flippant about it. Like, you're wrong for feeling like this sucks. That's really not what I'm trying to do. What I am trying to do is just make people understand. This is the UFC's audience is loyal and eager and willing to tolerate just about anything. Not anything, but just about anything. They will tolerate this. And because there's really no alternative that doesn't do this, that they could say, oh, well, I'd rather give my money to this consumer-friendlier alternative, this is what you're going to get. Yeah. I haven't seen the first Bilal. Someone's asking about the first Bilal and Leon fight. I haven't seen that fight in so long. I don't have much to say about it. How many Arby's beef and cheddars will it take for BC to do a cover of Walk by Pantera and post it on the channel? Probably 0. But if I gave him a beef and cheddar, it would certainly improve my chances, right? Okay. Let's see. Luke, tell me how this is a bad idea. What if the UFC gave interim champions chances to co-promote with other MMA orgs when the UFC has plans with their lineal champion? So in the case of Tom Aspinall, he could hold the interim until Jones versus Stipe concludes. Tom himself could get a fight to stay active, collect a paycheck, and likely add a win to his record that wouldn't count against his UFC record. While UFC could say, look, even our interim champions smash other organizational champions if he wins. And if he loses, they get to say it was only our interim champion, not our real champion, and that fight doesn't count on our organization. Why do I feel like everyone wins in this scenario? Because you're, I think, somewhat confused about it. I mean, it's not to say that there aren't ways where everyone could win, depending on how you arrange the card. If any time the UFC were to co-promote, you could have one co-promotion fight on one card. But what I think would end up happening is you'd have to have more than one, or at a bare minimum, a different kind of co-promoted fight at a later date. So, for example, some of these UFC and Pride ones where that Chuck was supposed to go and fight in Pride, and then Vanderlei was supposed to come fight in UFC. Now it ended up happening, but not under the terms originally agreed to. And so that's why they ended up being sour on it, at least in the early going. But what I mean to say is there was a bit of an organizational swap where, one entity could still benefit more, but you kind of layered the number of challenges by adding more fights to the co-promotion effort so that it ends up being a bit of a wash in the end for both parties. And in that sense, you could claim a little bit of victory. So it would require more than just one fight happening. You'd have to have several as a part of a co-promotional effort, I think, to make it worth everyone's while, is the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is that it doesn't necessarily work this way, right? So let's say I would pick Tom Aspinall to beat any heavyweight not in the UFC, except maybe Francis, and that's a little bit of a different argument. But if Francis is busy doing boxing, and by the way, Tom could beat him too, but I'm just saying I'd automatically pick him to beat anybody else. The reality is, if he does lose there, now you have fucked up your essentially your unification in your own organization. And in John's case, where he's just sitting on the title and not doing shit, I mean, the guy just went back to camp this week, apparently, according to social media. In a situation like that, where they're not even doing anything, yeah, you kind of want to see Tom go take fights outside of that. And I guess that's what's going to happen when I'm assuming he's going to fight on that Manchester card. But typically it would be for a case where someone is injured. And so if you let the interim champ go out and fight and they get fucking waxed, you can say, yeah, that's not even our champion. That's our interim champion. But now who the fuck's supposed to fight your champion when they come back? You just ruin the number one contender. No one will see him as the authoritative one anymore. And also remember, again, I'm going to say this to everybody. This is why, I kind of posed this challenge a little bit to Dan. I stated it, I think, in a nice way, but it really is the challenge. How do you ever get legitimacy for your roster if the UFC doesn't allow for crossover? Now, of course, your argument's going to be, well, they don't have to. That's true, but this is bad for MMA. It's good for UFC, but it's bad for the broader MMA market, right? Understand something. Again, I'm going to say it one more time. There is at any point in time a group of fighters, champions in particular, that the public recognizes as the preeminent ones, the ones that matter. And to the extent that you want any legitimacy, you got to get it off of them. And if you don't allow your fighters to ever fight anyone else, even if all your fighters end up winning, but if you never even allow it, there's never a chance for anyone else to build a roster and then cross-challenge it against another one and then build legitimacy in that way. I have watched every organization. I have watched hundreds of millions of dollars set on fire with the IFL fucking Quad City Silverbacks and Elite XCs doing whatever the fuck they're doing the entire time, and Bellator doing whatever they're doing. And I mean, you name it, dude. The amount of places I have seen try and build rosters outside of when the UFC at least became the more dominant force, and then just burn through hundreds of millions of dollars. Pro Elite tried this a million times. You can't do it. It will not work. It will. Strikeforce got pretty close. Everyone's like, oh, when Strikeforce, these guys come over to the UFC, it's going to be a rude awakening. Dude, they came through and fucking stomped a mud hole in the UFC. Those guys did. They were way better than advertised. Same with WEC. I remember distinctly when WEC was brought over, not so much everyone above 155, like, because they had like Steve the Cantwell robot. Steve the Robot Cantwell, excuse me. I think he was champ at 205 for a while. I mean, Brian Stan was a champ there for a while. Above that, it's a different story. But when they had 155 and down, and even when there was overlap at 155, the Benson Hendersons, the Anthony Pettises, the Cowboy Cerrones, these were all WEC guys, the Jamie Varners. These are all WEC guys who came over and had enormous success in the UFC. Just totally fucking wrong. Carlos Condit, same thing. Granted, that's 170. But you get my point. There was way more legitimacy than anybody felt. But you didn't know, and it didn't count until they came over. The UFC has learned if you deny that until you end up just benefiting it because now it's your organization, you realize, holy shit, man, there's a lot to lose here. Look at PFL and Bellator, that crossover champions one they had. Dude, Bellator ran the fucking table on them. Except for the heavyweight one at the very end. That's it. So, That's how you build legitimacy. Not so much PFL versus Bellator, but that you need that crossover halo. You deny them that, you have nothing. You have nothing. There's no way to build that. And that's why long term, it's like, I don't know how you get that back from UFC unless someone makes fights in that way. Otherwise, it's just not possible. The best UFC fighter to not win a title can be both men and women. Best UFC fighter. So Cerrone would be on that list. Who else would be on that list? Gustafsson would be on that list. If we're talking full weight class titles, Poirier is going to be on that list. Yeah, things like that. Okay, good question. Luke, given that Bobby Green was able to bounce back after that vicious Jalen KO, does that give you a bit more optimism about Jamahal Hill returning relatively soon versus Roundtree? No D in Roundtree, by the way. Also, how do you see that fight playing out? Okay, yes. We have to be, again, if there's any lesson about overlooking people, you have to be very careful about that. What I would say, though, is Jim Miller, very, very tough, but in his 40s, quite literally, can strike. Well-rounded. Actually, Jim Miller is well-rounded, but not a dynamic striking threat necessarily. In fact, you could see he was outgunned in this fight. This is actually the lesson I would take from it. Roundtree is not that. That's the difference. Roundtree is not 40-year-old plus Jim Miller. Again, good fighter. Great, very good fighter. Well-rounded, but not an overwhelming force of nature on the feet. Roundtree's much closer to that. That makes it different. That makes the gamble a little, and not the same kind of miles, not the same kind of age. I would say Roundtree is kind of surging a little bit towards a potential championship potential. Not the same. So I grant what you're saying. That was a really bad stoppage, and then I thought Green came back very quickly. I think we all thought that. But did it really hold him back in that performance? Wasn't a lot of evidence for that. Again, just didn't really seem to affect him as much as some had potentially worried. Very good. Glad to see that, as a matter of fact. But while that's a tough challenge in Jim Miller, again, in part because he is so well-rounded, it's not that hammering, fucking knuckle you into the ground kind of threat that Khalil Roundtree is. Khalil Roundtree's got one-hitter quitter power, or to bare minimum, fight-changing power. Jim Miller has had that against guys who were not elite, but he hasn't really had that against elite guys. Not anytime recently, anyway. Okay, here we go. It's a good question. Look, I hope you're well. I know you spoke about it with Ryan, but in a more general sense, Teo Lopez before the Josh Taylor fight, to an extent, Strickland before Izzy, Fury before Klitschko, and going back all the way, Ali before Liston, without sounding disrespectful, fighters playing up mental health issues. Not saying they don't have them to begin with, to try and mess up their opponents and make them drop their game a bit. Also, I'm the guy who asked the question about Max's legacy if he ices Topuria and gets you back-to-back, looking real scary all of a sudden. Yeah, you're right. Holy shit. Fucking hell. Yeah, good point, and good question, too. Yeah, I mean, there has to be something to it. This is something that and again, in trying to assess what went wrong, people are like, oh, what went wrong in the predictions for Devin Haney? Because Devin Haney was, what was he, minus 800? Like, he was a significant favorite. So who was it, LaShawn McCoy, who put 250 on him and then lost? Fuck, But what I would say is, I don't feel like Sean wasn't playing mind. I mean, he's playing a few mind games about the dog and stuff like that, but not really. Also, Sean was expressing concern about what a tough fight it was going to be. Don't you guys recall Sean being like, I know I'm going to come back beaten up, bloody, bruised, but I'm going to find a way, or I'm going to do this for you guys. Like, almost like he was like martyring himself in some kind of way. And then he goes and he fucking wins, but he was at least very conscious and, to a degree anyway, respectful of what the threat was at a bare minimum that he was facing. So I feel like that's different. Ali before Liston, there is some of that. Fury before Klitschko, he was dressing up like the Batman and Joker and like all kinds of shit at press conferences and had these wild, crazy antics. That's a great comparison. That one seemed a little bit more performative, because if he was literally using like props and costumes and shit, so that like it's obviously kind of satirical or comical. Whereas with Ryan, I mean, dude, this is the thing with Ryan. It's like, did I misjudge his boxing ability? Clearly. Did I, to an extent, again, I still want to be clear about this. I think Devin Haney is a good fighter and will regain some glory, but I can only speak for myself, my own failed assessment. What did I miss about it? I overestimated, or at a bare minimum, I underestimated, I should say, his defensive lapses. So I think that counts. The part that I just would have never have seen coming was, did you guys see the interview with one of, it was on Fight Hype, with one of one of Haney's cornermen? And he goes, that 143 was intentional. The 143 was he didn't ever intend to make weight. He intended to miss, and he wanted to miss at just the right amount. Because if you miss too much, 5 pounds or more, the commission won't let you fight. They'll just call the whole thing off. Too much of a weight disparity. But if you're pretty close, commission's gonna ask you to keep cutting to see if you can make it. And so at 43.2, 143.2 is where he came in. They know it's not worth even trying to cut, but it's not so much that they're going to cancel the fight. And so his argument was that was strategically planned. Now, I don't know if that's true. But what I'm trying to say is there was a level of at least some kind of planning about a way they wanted to approach this fight, Team Garcia, that they wanted to have people fooled or subvert expectations or something like that. The problem for me that I just would not have been able to look past, I mean, this was the thing that, like, I don't know how I wouldn't have got. I could have been wrong and at least not been arrogant about it, right? That was really my problem. My problem was like, I was like completely dismissive. I mean, I think that's the part that people have rightly noted was like really over the top and some bullshit. Quite fair, actually. But I don't think being generically wrong about Ryan is actually that big a deal. Between the weight miss and me just not assuming, again, did he do it on purpose or not? I don't know. But between that and then drinking in the club, which he admitted and there were eyewitnesses to. And then, of course, there were, folks forget about, he had kind of like harassed that female TikToker or whatever. Between the missing of the weight and then, dude, I mean, guys, just in a little bit of fairness, is drinking in a club on fight week for the toughest opponent you've ever faced. Would you call that normal behavior on fight week? I mean, you guys watch a lot of fights too. It's not normal. Not saying it doesn't happen, but it's not normal. Not saying it doesn't happen and guys win, but it's not normal. It's not the kind of thing that is conducive to success long-term, typically. So that is hard for me to overlook. But clearly, in the end, what effect materially did it have? He may have been bigger, but as I argued on Monday's MK, even if you argue that he was bigger and then bigger by design, potentially on your perspective, he still couldn't, by his own admission, he couldn't go 12 rounds. So you still got something of a diminished Ryan no matter what. Even if he was slightly bigger, he was definitely still diminished. He had to fight in spurts, you know? I just don't know how I would have been able to see past that. I mean, for me, those are like red flags, you know? But it looks like we have to understand that kind of craziness doesn't always impact performance. Some of it could be intentional. Some of it could be by design. It's just a wake-up call for me to be a little bit more careful about. I think it's okay to have thought Devin Haney was going to win. I don't think that's the craziest thing in the world. But perhaps being so dismissive of Ryan in the way that I and others may have been, even with all of those other complicating factors, I think that was the issue. Well, I'm not going to do that fucking twice. Let me assure you. I will not do that twice. Let's see. Okay, here's a follow-up. I know some humble pie or crow was on the menu after Garcia's win. Yes, of course. But are we really supposed to believe that King Ryan is okay mentally, especially after that fight week? The substance use and the other antics have to catch up with him at some point soon, right? So, do you guys know Rayo Valenzuela? He's fighting Isaac Cruz coming up. By the way, that fight is going to be fucking sick. Rayo was the guy, which, by the way, just means lightning. His nickname is Lightning. Rayo was the guy who knocked out Chris Colbert in like a knockout of the year contender at the end of, I think it was like the last Showtime card or one of the last ones, with that flying hook, and he fucking knocked him out like brutally, and the guy like collapsed into the ropes. That was Rayo. he made a point, and it's not like something that we don't know, but it is true. He was like, you know, he even said, he's like, I mean, I don't know about all that drinking in the club shit, like, in terms of saying like that's good for you. He was like, you know, and it will catch up with you eventually if you do it. But did it catch up with him this time? No. Dude, stated simply, that's just the reality. Long term, would you, if you were a trainer and you were trying, again, we're talking about these 6 a.m. fight windows, like 5 a.m. fight windows. If you were tasked with optimizing someone's performance, would you recommend, no matter what time of the day they were fighting, that they drink on fight week? Or would you look the other way? No, you'd be like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Doesn't mean they won't win, but you would be very curious about it and concerned, certainly. I still have some concerns about Ryan's well-being, but I have to just kind of fucking be quiet for a little bit, see what he's going to do next, see how it all plays out. If it is true he had been trolling to a large degree, again, that part's hard to know exactly how much, then we need to just kind of, certainly people like me need to just kind of see how it goes and try to make a, you know, a judgment based on less old biases that clearly don't apply in certain ways. Not so much about the substance abuse, but about his ability to perform and his overall skill level. So I'm just going to kind of wait and see. I think we'll see what's next for him. I certainly hope he can get these things under control. I do think there are some things to be concerned about, but as it relates to his performance on Saturday, didn't hold him up too much, did it? You know? Luke, give me your best effort in guessing who Raquel Pennington is referring to when she says that Kayla Harrison is, quote, skipping the line at 135 and taking away opportunities from all these other women. I need actual names. I don't know. I mean, I guess you could say Pena. I don't know. I don't really know. Kayla Harrison is injecting life into 135, not taking anything from it. Like 135 now, at a bare minimum, the top of it is significantly more interesting now that Kayla's here. And again, that weight cut, didn't think it was going to go well for her. I don't think it was very easy. I don't think she can do it very many times, but she did it. And she looked phenomenal at 300. So, yeah, I don't know who these are, like very deserved people that she's referring to, other than again Pena. But if either she's available or she's not, you know. Luke, what do you make of Garcia now saying Haney has more power than Tank and would beat Davis in a matchup? You did say recently that Tank is more of an accurate boxer with impeccable timing than a straight power puncher. I think that's true, yes. What changes in Haney versus Davis, given Garcia was a bad matchup? Oh, I see. What changes in Haney versus Davis, given Garcia was a bad matchup for Haney? Why could Haney be a bad matchup for Tank? So I could actually see Haney winning round. Dude, I actually see it kind of relatively similar to Tank, or to Garcia, in the sense that, I mean, they're very different fighters, different body types, very different styles, different weight classes, you know. Well, now different weight classes anyway. But ultimately a very similar kind of outcome. Dude, Tank will, I'm not going to say take rounds off, but he is very patient. And he takes his time and he doesn't really leap out. And like, when was the last time you saw Tank get hit with like a monster shot and then have to recover, or just get hit clean and wide open? Happens time to time. Hello, he's prize fighting other very good fighters, but it's pretty rare. It actually doesn't happen all that often. He's got pretty good defense. I did a whole breakdown on this. I think we took that one down, actually. Fuck me. Anyway, you get the idea. He's a very, very accurate power puncher. He doesn't take a lot of stuff cleanly. He just takes his time. Now, sometimes guys make things themselves more available than normal, like Leo Santa Cruz, just kind of spamming right hands and then getting uppercutted into fucking, you know, the outer limits of the galaxy from Tank Davis. But I think it'd be the same. I think Haney's problem, like, okay, so couple of Haney's problems. We all have talked about the one where he pulls his hand away when he jabs. His jab is his number one weapon, and he pulls his hand away either down or like back when he throws. Even Floyd was talking about it. Guys, Boxing Gems has been talking about that in Haney's fights for years at this point. I went back and I looked at some of his old breakdowns. He's been talking about that repeatedly. And Lomachenko would crack him, but he just couldn't really hurt him. But like, this is a huge problem, but that's not the only one. He would roll and square up. And that's why, well, how many times do you see Devin Haney just stand there, anticipate pressure, and then get nailed? Not just with Ryan Garcia, in other fights too. Prograis fight was a little bit that way as well. So that's another problem. And then one of the bigger ones that I just didn't fully appreciate, I think, was how much he'll throw and then just stand there rather than rolling and then exiting. Sometimes he can see pressure coming and he'll get out of the way, but a lot of times he just gets caught flat, or aforementioned doing what he. I mean, it's just it's just a certain inability to anticipate. It's a position issue to anticipate. It's like, dude, a guy like that, where I'm not saying Devin Haney won't get better. What I'm saying is, to the extent that those issues continue to plague him, a sharpshooter with one-punch knockout power like Tank does is going to feast on a guy like that, because he's going to take advantage of the timing. He's going to take advantage of your evasion. He's going to take advantage of your rolling to square. He's going to take advantage of all kinds of shit. He's going to see all these little windows and light you on fire for it. So to me, it's like, people are pointing out, hey, look at Devin Haney's offense between rounds 2 and 5. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. But the lesson is not so much that he didn't have an offense to win, although part of it ended up being that Haney didn't have enough power to keep Ryan off of him. That is part of it. But like, really, what lost Devin Haney this fight? Was it his offense? Played a role. I would say it's his defense, right? I think that's the fairer conclusion here, is his defense just simply did not hold up. And everyone's talking about Ryan shoulder rolling without ever really noticing, at previous times when he's done it kind of in the middle of the ring. This time he did it inside the turnbuckle or on the ropes themselves, and so he gave very little to hit in those cases. It was actually hard to hit him. For example, Haney's cornerman was talking about something like that. So, dude, a powerful guy who can create openings, take advantage of them, and can one-punch KO you right now is a tough fight for anybody, but that's a very tough fight for Devin Haney. Also, one thing that also fucked me up was, remember, what was the big narrative coming out of the Prograis fight? Because remember, he rocked Prograis a bunch of time for his head slot position, right? Prograis would pre-slip. This comes straight from the Boxing Gems breakdown. Pre-slip, and then he would just time the pre-slip and crack him, and then he would rattle him, and you thought, oh, wow, Haney's got power now. That was dude, look at what everyone was saying. Like, does Devin Haney have underrated power now that we saw what he did in the Prograis fight? And then he goes into this one, he couldn't do shit to Ryan. So there's just a few things that were cooking that helped make that a more surprising call for not just me, but for others, but certainly for fucking me. So I was asking, do you think John Kavanagh is an overrated coach? It depends how you rate him. Remove McGregor from his resume, and he is decidedly average. McGregor was already, in my opinion, always going to succeed. There's probably something to be said for that. In the sense of, if you remove McGregor, like, does he have other McGregors? But at the same time, like, I mean, listen, I think he's a fine coach. I don't know how you rate him. Do I rate him as like, top 5 coaches in the sport? I mean, that's a high bar. Even if you're not that, you're still really, really good. So I definitely think he's a talented coach. I definitely think he's a good coach. I don't know if I can consider him, one of the very best coaches in the sport. I don't know if I consider him, one of the most brilliant minds. But listen, he has the capability of producing a champion, which we've seen. I think that he is very experienced. I think the vast majority of people who want to fight would get better working with him. Like, the overwhelming majority of people would get better working with him. And he is competent, and more than competent, he's good at what he does in general. So, it really depends. Like, people want to say so-and-so, not just him, anybody, oh, they're overrated. But it's like, well, where are you rating him? I rate him as good to very good. Like, very, potentially even better than that. Like, he's a very talented guy. I don't know if I would put him like pound for pound or something if there was such a thing for coaches. I don't know if I would do that. But clearly, I don't think his success is accidental, and I don't think it's strictly a function of what McGregor did. Obviously, McGregor sends everything around him into overdrive, of course, but not the only thing. All right. With that in mind, let's get to what you guys got on the Super Chats. Again, it's certainly under no obligation, and if you remember, you can do it for free. But for everybody else, if you want to, now's a good time. All right. There we are. Let's do it. Okay, Luke, should a point have been taken from Haney for the excessive clinching? Yes, but hold on. He was out on his feet shooting for double legs. Yes. Also, Garcia admitted to drinking a Blue Moon the day of the fight. What the fuck? I have seen Ilia Topuria say he does a little bit of wine drinking during his weight cutting process because it makes him very susceptible to getting drunk very easily, and it actually lowers his anxiety, and that actually helps him lose more weight. And there is actually something to that. Dr. Mike Israetel has often talked about people who lose weight when they start a weight loss program. They're often full of tension because they're just waiting to see the numbers drop off the scale, and they're all full of anxiety. And then they go to weigh in, and their body is holding on to all of this weight and salt and everything else in this water because you're full of anxiety. And then the number on the scale doesn't change. What ends up happening is people will eat like junk food. It lowers their anxiety. The weight pours off. Then they go back to weigh in a day or two later, and they're like, oh my God, all the weight fell off even though I ate chocolate. It's like, it's not because you ate chocolate exactly. It's that you lowered the anxiety from the eating the chocolate, but it's not like eating the calories is what did it, or there's something pharmacologically responsible. It had a psychological response and everything happened. So the weight coming off of Ilia, even though he's drinking wine, I think is a function of that. But your question was, again, one more time, should a point have been taken? Yeah, dude, what the fuck was that, dude? I mean, Harvey Dock is not a bad referee. Harvey Dock was the referee in Lomachenko and Haney. I went back and I watched that fight, and he did a great job. He did a great job. Haney wasn't hanging on for dear life, but yes, I don't think he should have taken a point from Ryan necessarily. I thought it didn't matter in the end, but that I didn't think was great. He had an off night, man. And that's a tough thing to do. And I give Haney credit in the sense of, did he show? I mean, dude, you can't say he didn't do everything he possibly could, legal or otherwise, to hang on. He did. I give him credit. He showed real toughness, perhaps to a fault, but he did. But Harvey Dock let that one get away from him. Not every good referee is going to have a great night. He did not have a great night. That one got away from him. Yes, a point should have been taken, or bare minimum, just being better to separate and then forcing the action. And let's see if Haney can hang on. I'm shouting happy mother effing birthday to everyone's favorite donk, chat mod and MC, the big dog Othello. Yes, he turns 37 today. Hope you're as baked as beans, Othman. I don't know if he gets busy with the Devil's Lettuce. I don't think he does. How much of a hit does viewership take when you have a run of less than amazing Fight Nights pay-per-view 301 my bang, but it's a done on paper? Pretty significantly. Yeah, all that stuff matters a lot when there's no big fights going on. It hurts a lot. Luke, you quitted the military because of Bush's war on terror, but what was your career plan prior to 9/11? Okay, I didn't quit the military. You cannot quit the military. You can wait till your contract is up, and then you can choose not to resign. That's what I did. That's not exactly quitting. You don't go into your boss's office and go, hey, I'm turning in my 2 weeks notice. There's no such thing. You just wait until the contract you signed expires, and then that's it. The plan didn't really change one way or the other. I had still planned on just getting out of the military and then doing anything else. But, I was a fucking philosophy major. I don't really know what I want to do. How would you rank the fights between the four kings of violence, Gaethje, Poirier, Alvarez, and Chandler, in terms of pure action and entertainment? Boy, that is tough. That's hard to go wrong. I'd rank Poirier probably first. I might rank Alvarez. No, sorry. Gaethje first. Poirier's got some bangers. Yeah, I might go in that order. I'd go Gaethje first. Yeah, I might go in that order, but there's not much separating any of them. That's a tough one. What would an emphatic KO of Conor do for Chandler, and how would that affect Conor's MMA career? It might retire him, to be perfectly honest. It might retire him. I think it would boost Chandler's fortunes to a significant degree. It's just with all the time that he lost and with what little he has remaining, I don't know exactly how he would leverage that into. I mean, he probably would get a title shot of some kind or a BMF fight of some kind, and then potentially put himself in a way to get more money out of that. I don't exactly know. It would just be good for notoriety. It would be a big name on his career to say he has, for a guy who was like the face of Bellator through the 2010s, it would be a fairly dramatic turnaround in terms of like the high profile nature of the wins that were available to him. But I don't know if it would substantively change a whole lot at this point, just given how little time he has remaining to win. Yanks need 30 pounds of gear to feel safe while playing rugby, which he calls football, and you need guns to feel safe. Oh no, I don't own one. No wonder American women love me. It's just your accent, Ant. It's not much else. Not much else about you is charming. Okay, Luke, this fight night card is cheeks. Yeah, it is. If you had to pick a fight on that card that is semi-interesting, can you name it? All right, let's see what we got. Let's see. So we've got Mateusz Nicolau, right? Let's see what we got here. Okay, so coming up on this weekend, we've got main event Nicolau versus Perez. Fine, it's a good fight. Span versus Guskov. Can't say I care much. Karini Silva versus Ariana Lipsky is okay. Jonathan Denise versus Austin Lang. Don't really care. Jonathan Pierce versus David Onama is mildly interesting. Tim Means versus Uroš Medic is cool. That's a good fight. A good welterweight fight. That's a good one. Veteran versus kind of a guy who has looked pretty good. Stumbled a little bit, but has looked pretty good. I like that one a lot. Hani Yahya versus Victor Henry. Victor Henry, if you guys might remember, was the guy who got kicked in the balls in Abu Dhabi. And then the doctor was like, no, you didn't. Keep fighting. He's like, what the fuck are you talking about? That's him. Austin Hubbard is back against Michael Figlak. And then Dontel Mays versus Caio Machado. Yeah, I mean, there's like 2 fights on this card, 3 fights that are worth the shit. You know. Hey, Ron, welcome to the party, my friend. Welcome to the party. Did you see the exchange between Bill Haney and Floyd? Yes, I did. Is Floyd correct when he says Devin should work with a more experienced coach after one loss? Yes, he is. Which trainer would you choose if you had a choice? That one's a little harder to say. I don't know what's best for him, and I think he probably wants to stay out on the West Coast. I don't really know. I don't know exactly. I mean, what Floyd said was, you don't have to get rid of your dad. You can keep your dad in your corner, in your dressing room, in your training sessions, everything. You can keep him right there, but you should add another voice there that is an experienced high-level boxer. Yes, I tend to agree with that. I tend to think that, like, again, I'm going to say it one more time, and I made the mistake, too, of seeing his flaws, thinking that they're not really a big deal, or in certain cases, just missing them altogether. And then here they are, they just get completely blown up. Again, you don't want to overreact to a loss like this. So what Floyd, I thought, was correct. Don't get rid of the dad. But when you have a loss this bad, you were a pound-for-pound guy, and he wasn't, and you got smoked. If you have a loss that bad, that's surprising. It didn't happen by accident. And I know he's making it about the weight. Maybe it did play a role. I can't say that it didn't. But there were technical flaws, and that's what Floyd is going on about. Like, dude, Bill is going on, and Devin wants a rematch at 147. Fine, I'd be happy to see that if they wanted to do that. But you notice what they're all focusing in on. They're focusing in on the weight and the surprise and all that shit. And what is Floyd focusing in on? All the technique stuff. I would listen to Floyd. What are you and BC doing for International Fight Week Conor's return? Meet and greet. Great question, dude. We're going to Vegas next week for Canelo, and we have not planned a fucking thing beyond that. But we probably will do. I don't know. We haven't even talked about it yet, but we will. I mean, also 302 is going to be in New Jersey, so we should do something for that too, right? Have you seen Red Letter Media's Best of the Worst episode with surviving edged weapons? If not, you really need to. I have not seen that. I have not. I watched their review of Predator 2, not Predators, not Alien versus Predator, Predator 2, which had Danny Glover in it, and they loved it. And I'm like, I got to tell you guys, I love you, and I agreed with certain parts of it, but that movie kind of sucks. Kind of sucks. What kind of car do you drive, and what is your dream car? So I'm not one of these guys who gives much of a fuck about cars. Don't get me wrong. If someone has a nice car or a convertible, I would love to take a ride in it. Like, that's cool. Don't get me wrong. Riding in a limo is cool. I've done it a couple times in my life, right? Once for prom. And then they got us one for the awards ceremony when we won the MMA award. It's cool. It's cool. But I'm not a car guy. Like, I'm not like, oh, the carburetor in this you can change for the X56 Thunder fucking. I mean, don't get me wrong. If people like that, I like things that are way dumber than that. So I'm not in any way suggesting I'm better. It just I would be lying if I said cars speak to me. Dude, there's this TikTok like series going around that I follow where someone in a car dealership will go around the dealership and they'll start asking people, "Hey, what kind of car do you drive and how much does it cost?" Right? And these people will be like, "Yeah, I drive." They'll work at like Mercedes. And then they'll be like, "Yeah, I drive a 2020 Honda Accord. My car note is like 750." I'm like, dude, what the fuck are y'all doing? Maybe one person per dealership's like, "I don't have a car note because it's all paid off." But I've seen people who have car notes above 1,000, above 1,200, above 1,800. I've seen, you're paying mortgage money for a fucking car. I cannot imagine pissing away my money that way. So I drive a 2015 Mazda CX-5. I think that's right, CX-5, and it's completely paid off. I don't owe a thing on it, and it only has. I bought it almost 10 years ago. It'll be 10 years ago. It'll be 9 years ago next month. I bought it in May of 2015, and not only is it all paid off, I only have 42,000 miles on it. I barely even use it. So, what's great about that is all the extra disposable income that I get to keep. That I don't have to worry about, and I don't really drive my car around, as you can tell by the mileage, very much. I take the metro, I walk, I take my bike. It's cool. Oh, dream car. I don't even know. I've always liked the aesthetic design of Mercedes more than BMW, but that's about it. I mean, that's the most I can say. Someone's gonna be like the 1963 Stingray. I'm like, that's cool. I'm not into that shit. If you could have any car from a movie. What the fuck kind of questions about these cars? Or show, what car would it be? Fucking Batmobile. What kind of a question is this? The car does not come with special features. I prefer the DeLorean myself. I don't want the DeLorean. I just want a normal car. I don't give a shit about any of this stuff. Mario, what's up, dude? Why are there, spelled wrong, U.S. sanctions against anyone that does business with Daniel Kinahan, but when it comes to Riyadh season, it's all okay because they're heads of state in a commodity-rich sovereign nation? Should Kinahan have paid off some U.S. politicians? Probably, but he is not the head of state of a sovereign nation that has significant and important commodities. So, is it hypocrisy? Potentially, but there are substantive differences as well. I'm 23 and been looking for a gym to train MMA and boxing, but all the gyms near me are McDojos. Why do you think it's so hard to find a great gym? It may not be as hard. You could be wrong about your assessment that they're McDojos. I don't know without understanding where you live or what you've seen that makes the McDojos, it's hard for me to understand. What I'm typically going to tell people is if you don't have one for good MMA and boxing, try to find one for jiu-jitsu. If you don't have one for jiu-jitsu, see if there's a wrestling club. If there's not a wrestling club, you tell me that there's not like good boxing. Where do you live that there's not good boxing? Beverly Hills? Like, for example, where are the best boxing gyms in DC? Are they in Georgetown? No. Are they in DuPont Circle? No. Are they in the Southwest Waterfront? No. Dude, they're in Southeast and not the fucking Capitol Hill part of it either. Like, they're not in the nice part of town. Like, you go to Baltimore, where are the best gyms for boxing? Are they in Fells Point? No. And you can get some good boxing gyms in New York City that are in some decent areas. For example, Gleason's is in a decent area in now Brooklyn, or Church Street Gym, whatever. But even that one's like a converted racquetball court. Like, it's not super nice. So like, if you're in a place where there's a lot of McDojos, what it sounds to me is like there's probably a lot of strip malls there, and that maybe not necessarily worth your time. But if you're in an area where, like, either if you're in a rich area and you have McDojos, that's one problem. But the other one would be like if you're in an economically disadvantageous area, you might have some good training available to you. You really have to just kind of look a little bit harder. So without knowing exactly what you're up against, I can't say. But I would take a second look, or at a bare minimum, some training is better than none. Am I the only one tired of divisions being held up by talks of champ fights? Everyone's tired of that. Great reigns come from repeated defenses. Yes, but I haven't heard anything in the last couple of weeks about that. Opinion on college students across the U.S. protesting against the genocide in Gaza. Does this guarantee Biden will not win the re-election? Recent poll numbers have been more favorable to him, whatever that's worth. I will say this, and this has also gotten plenty of support from the right. Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida has been very clear about this. So has Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio. These are both, MAGA Republicans. Dude, Lena Khan of the FTC. Well, actually, it wasn't just her this week, but getting rid of non-competes, which is fucking incredible. Love that. I mean, it's not going to get me to vote for anybody, but I definitely love to see it. Also, Secretary Buttigieg saying if your flight is canceled, and if there's a certain window in which it has to happen, they can refund. The airlines have to refund you in cash. There's a little bit more to it than that, but that's also pretty fucking great. So there's been a couple of good consumer-friendly rulings that have come through, which I've enjoyed. I will be honest. I mean, listen, I saw a couple of students at Princeton who were who won't be able to finish their studies because they're expelled from campus for protesting, which seems to me McCarthyite bullshit and extremely punitive. I certainly share my solidarity to an extent. I mean, from my ideological perspective, I certainly share my solidarity with people protesting genocide and then asking their universities to divest any of their business interests from the state of Israel. I certainly understand their message, and I in no way want to be. I want to be clear. I'm in no way suggesting that I have anything but admiration for them. But what I would say is, the focus on them as like this is some kind of like enormous event that is of earth-shattering importance, while authorities in Gaza are discovering up to 700 or more bodies in mass graves, and there's barely any coverage of this, to me is like, it's not that I don't care what's happening on Columbia's campus. Again, I think a lot of what these students are doing is both heroic and important. Again, not every student, but the vast majority of them. But I think distracts us from what is like. There's so much about like, hey, what is going on the campus of Harvard? And it's like, guys, I don't give a fuck. I don't care, and I don't think the average American cares. I don't think the average American should care. I care about our institutions of higher learning. I care about what this might mean if it's a tempest in the teapot or otherwise. I mean, I'm not saying it's utterly irrelevant that there should be no coverage of it. And of course, the fact that there's now this like police state crackdown is only going to make things worse because it's going to create more coverage of it, and I think undermine the state's interest in trying to squash these protests. It also kind of lays bare the hypocrisies of post-secondary higher education institutions and their so-called commitment to free speech and the world of protests. But it's really not what I'm focused on. What's happening in Gaza is of vastly more importance, even though it's not a domestic issue per se, although it's become one through this lens. I feel like there's a lot of hand-wringing and hectoring that the American and Western media loves to do against what are seen as outrageous or otherwise maybe well-intentioned but perhaps ignorant kids on these college campuses, and how much attention has to be paid to that. And I think that is just grossly disproportionate to its actual relevance and importance. I commend them. I express ideological solidarity with many of them, but the media intense focus on it is over the top, and we should be focusing on significantly more important matters that aren't necessarily in our back door, but have relevance to us. What other instances can you recall being as worried for a fight or pre-fight as you were for Garcia? Ooh, good question. Maybe like Kazushi Sakuraba at the end, where he was completely beat up, where like the level of fear I had was obviously not based in reality, it turned out, but you're talking about someone where you're worried for their health. Yeah, something like Kazushi Sakuraba at the end, BJ Penn at the end, something like that. I'm going to give you a recommendation for a new show to watch, X-Men 97. I saw episode 1. The animation is fantastic, and the writing is relevant. There was even an insurrection in episode 2. Haven't got there yet, but I did see episode 1. I'll give it a look. Luke, your favorite burger joint wants to add an LT burger to the menu. What's on it? How is it prepped? Ooh. Okay. That's a great question. Double patty, 2 slices of American cheese. You could do cheddar. I would say after that, hot peppers. Man, that's a good question. Fuck. Now I got to think about this. Hot peppers, tomatoes. Definitely going to add some like garlic, aioli. For sure on that. And then probably, fuck, I don't know, man. That's a good question. You definitely would do the double stack. You definitely would do the double stack with the cheese. I like hot food and I like avocado. So I'd probably mix something like that. I don't know how good that is. Sorry, I don't know how good that is. It's probably a terrible answer. Are you aware Brendan Schaub is Kenny Florying your combat sports takes? Most recent one was Haney Garcia, word for word, bar for bar. I think people have asked me about this before. I'm going to guess it's much more. I've not seen that, but I'm going to guess it's much more influence than robbery. The next couple of months look stacked for boxing. Between Fury and Usyk and Beterbiev and Bivol, which fight do you think will ultimately be more competitive? Ooh. Fury and Usyk. I feel like Beterbiev versus Bivol, like I want Beterbiev to win, but I feel like Bivol's just going to slow that fight down. But both of them could be fucking bangers. I mean, both of them are at a bare minimum really good. Bangers is a strong word because they're going to be cerebral, but very, very good. So I asked what was next for Ryan Garcia. Haney at 147, 45%. Isak Cruz 20. Terrence Crawford, which he won at Smoke with, was 20. And then Sebastian Fundora 13. That's probably about right, although I put Crawford maybe even less. Chances of you commentating a boxing card again? Don't know. Don't know. This business is fucking tough, dude. You guys have to understand something. I had the world's greatest job. Like, not only did the work I get to do was great, but the setup for what was next was like perfect. And then my industry changed and part of it collapsed and the timing could not have been worse. So I don't know. I maybe never commentate another one. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Why are you beating yourself up about genuine concern for a boxer that is being super erratic? He is clearly off his rocker. No need to be sorry, in my opinion. Again, 2 reasons why I'm going to disagree with that. One, the kind of arrogance I had about it was a problem. That's one. The other one is, again, I just would not have been able to look past the weight miss. I would not have been able to look past the drinking on fight week. That's just going to be a red flag for me no matter what. And I do think also, I think you guys know this too, 9 times out of 10, if a fighter misses weight and they're drinking on fight night, would you be concerned about them? Again, 9 times out of 10. Not every time, but 9 times out of 10, you would be. So on that level, I don't feel so bad. But it didn't affect his performance all that much in the end, somewhat, but not. It didn't limit him from winning, did it? Certainly not. And again, the other part is, it's what I missed about what was possible with Ryan, and it's what I missed about what was there with Devin that I just didn't properly take a look at. It's if you get something like crazy wrong, part of it is you may have had a reason to think that. Like it ended up being not right, but there must have been something that led you to believe that. And that part is true. There was something that led us to believe that. However, if you get something crazy wrong, it also means it was more than one thing that you probably didn't see. So I can put that one to the side and say, yeah, fair enough. He was acting like a fucking crazy man and missing weight and doing all this shit. Okay. But there was other things that we should have seen along the way. And again, there were people who were calling for Garcia to win. People who watch boxing a lot. It wasn't like it was this totally unknowable thing. That's why. Personal top 5 boxing memories. Number 1 is going to be Spence Crawford being there, just matter of factly. I'm just going to list these off in no particular order after that. So that would be 1. Dude, Canelo beating Plant was a big one. Plant Benavidez, I'll put those together. 2 different fights, 2 different times, but they meant a lot. 3, when Mike Tyson beat Razor Ruddock was a big one for me as a kid. That was a really big one, especially the rematch. Mayweather-Pacquiao being there, and then Mayweather-McGregor, which was silly boxing, but it was so big, it would still stand out, and that's in terms of how much fun that I had. No, sorry. I would put that honorable mention. Lamont Peterson versus Amir Khan in D.C. What's a bigger one for me? Why do NFL players go broke? See LaShawn McCoy. 250K on Haney. Oh, that's a bad beat, dude. Assuming Nicolau wins, how do you think he matches up against Albazi or Cara France? I've done no tape study on him this week, but from what I recall from previous weeks, Albazi is going to be a little bit too much, I think, in terms of his wrestling. Cara France, I think if Nicolau can make it more of a grappling affair, he can win. I don't know how that's going to go on the feet. On the feet, excuse me. He has the loss to Brendan Royval in the first. He's got good ground and pound. He's got some other one decisions. To me, it's a function of to what extent. So I wouldn't like him against Albazi, but I would take him potentially against Cara France. I have noticed you praising my country, Holland, on numerous occasions over the last years. You even did it on JRE. Wondering what the fuck is nice over here. Buddy, you just don't know how good you have it. Everyone who lives in a country is often hyper aware of its problems and really not aware of some of its broader charms. And one thing that I just don't think that the Dutch, or maybe the Dutch realize this, I don't know, but if they don't, let me remind them. Yes, the taxation can be high, but the social services relative to what you pay in taxes, you get a pretty good deal for it in terms of what ultimately comes out of it. But that's aside. It's the way that things are structured and the way that life goes there. The number of parks that are everywhere that people just spend time sitting in, how much green space there is, how much of it's connected via bicycle, how much you don't need a car to get around, is such a game changer for your quality of life for people who just live in suburban America and have to drive everywhere, drive to the bar, drive to the gym, drive to get a haircut, drive to see your friends. Everything is on the car. This is true for bigger parts of Europe in general, but the ability to escape that hell is a big part of it for me. Everything is well maintained there, relatively speaking. First of all, if you're an American, the level of English proficiency is nearly ubiquitous. The Dutch, literally almost all the Dutch, if not nearly all of them, speak English. Food was a little bit one note, but in general quite good. I couldn't believe how good the cheese were. There's deep-rooted culture there. It's close to other things to see. Amsterdam is, I think, one of the world's cool cities, even though it's a little bit, overdone at this point in terms of a lot of red light district and everything else. But between the quality of life, between the pace of life, the way in which broader society is organized, the way in which things are accessible, the way in which culture is built on top of itself, there's a lot to like about Holland. A lot. Holland is a great country. Whatever happened to Richard Schaefer's advisement of Jon Jones? I was thinking about that the other day. Seems to have gone away completely. I always question what he would actually offer to a UFC contracted fighter. Doesn't seem like much. Are you still keeping up with Marvel movies and shows on Disney Plus? I tried to watch. What was it the Marvels, the new one with Captain Marvel and like the other donks? I got like 15 minutes in and I cut bait. Do you think you'll watch Deadpool and Wolverine? Yes. How did you like the first two Deadpool movies? I loved them. First one more than the second one, but I loved them. I thought they were great. So yeah, I'll keep up with that for sure. Excluding Jones and Aspinall, is the overall current skill level better at UFC women's flyweight or UFC men's heavyweight? Probably women's flyweight. I mean, Gone is still changes things, but yeah, men's heavyweight is skill level is not high. It's probably women's flyweight. Bigger loser, Devin or Bill? Short term, Devin. Long term, maybe Bill. Short term, Devin for sure. Look, I'm not sure if you recall, but I mentioned that I was going to NZDF basic training a few months ago. Now 10 out of 16 weeks in, missing the MMA though. Buddy, how are you on a fucking computer if you're in basic training? Did you guys see this? The Navy recently let recruits call home, which I just found to be the most pathetic, soft-ass shit I've ever seen in my life. And I can't stand it when people like my age or older is like, back in my day, things were tougher. And I saw someone be like, what? People can't communicate with their families? Guys, you know what we did when I was in there in June of 1998? I wrote letters. You can write and receive as many letters as you like. And I received many of them. I wrote many of them. It worked just fine. There was no problem with it. Is it tough? Sure. Are you going to miss mommy a little bit? Maybe. It seems normal. Are the drill instructors going to laugh in your face about how your girlfriend is fucking everyone in your neighborhood but you? Yes, they will do that. They will do that. They will make fun of you right to your face. They'll ask you first day, raise your hand if you got a girlfriend, and be like, your girlfriend is fucking your best friend right now. They'll do this right to your face. This is a very real thing that happens, but there is no need to give them phone access. They can fucking cry and tell you how hard their life is. They don't need it. And so I don't know what's happening in New Zealand. I don't think New Zealand has the same kind of militaristic needs that the United States does. But when I saw that the Navy was then giving people phone calls home in the middle of boot camp, I was like, holy fucking shit. How hilarious would you dyeing your hair beard be for the next BC challenge? It's just not going to happen. People want me to either cut it off or dye it. They pay an extraordinary amount of attention to it, and I'm not going to do that. Did you have a measurable viewer boost after Rogan? I did not. No. I think you have to have like multiple exposures with him, or one like extremely big one. And I had like a good one, but that was it. So no, I did not have a big boost after that. Thoughts on wearing an American flag Saudi robe to the first Saudi U.S. boxing card? I mean, it's the United States. You can do what you want. Just, be careful if you ever go down to Riyadh afterwards. Luke, love the chat. And MK, like you, I'm really high on Ikram Aliskerov. Do you see a potential fight between him and Brendan Allen going? Ooh. I would pick Ikram right now. I still think Brendan Allen's got much better offense, much more well-roundedness, still some striking defensive issues. And I think a guy like Aliskerov could take advantage of him. Peanut butter. Shout out my brother Taylor for buying his new truck. Please, Luke. He's traveling Australia and working as a builder. Mission to find a missus. Good luck, bro. Not easy. Good luck to you. Any plans for joining the Riyadh U.S. opener? Probably not. I mean, I'll watch for boxing coverage, but I'm not going to go, I don't think. Luke, 100% agree with you about not being a car guy. I'm the same here. I grew up in San Francisco with great public transportation. I also detest those Fast and the Furious movies. Utter garbage to me. Let me ask you guys, thank you, Henry, I appreciate it. Let me ask you guys a question. Have you seen these videos? They come up on TikTok or Instagram, maybe YouTube Shorts. It'll be a bunch of donks who all failed out of high school, several hundred of them, in a parking lot or like abandoned street, and they'll have these cars that are like souped up, and they're doing donuts in them, and they'll donut around, and they'll invariably, here's my Apple Pen, they'll invariably whip around and then hit someone, and then this fucker goes flying all over the thing. And it's like, dude, I've seen like 100 of these videos. It doesn't matter what part of the country or day or world or whoever. How does that keep happening? And you're like, oh, well, the cars are making bigger donuts each time and people aren't paying attention and they get clipped. And I'm like, right. But I don't understand how you keep falling for something like that. Like, if you've gone to one of these before, you've probably been warned or seen this. How does that keep happening? I mean, I get that the people who do that, the ones who get hit like that, these are not Fulbright scholars. I get that, but it seems to happen too much for. I don't understand how that happens as often as it does. I guess I'll put it that way. Given that you are partly Armenian, how did you feel or think when Nargono Karabakh was ethnically cleansed back in early 2023? Despair in general, and apparently the Azerbaijani government still has yet more aims in terms of conquering any kind of disputed territory, or just raising problems with Armenia generally. Yeah, despair. But like, I'm so numbed out from everything that's happening now that like, I don't even know what to say anymore. Jesus fuck, people just won't stop. Given the upcoming Summer Olympics in Paris, among all gold medalists in combat sports, which disciplines would be most likely to succeed in a UFC 1 style? Wait, what? Given the upcoming Summer among all gold medalists in combat sports, okay. Which disciplines would be most likely to succeed in UFC style 1 open weight? Probably wrestling. or judo, but probably wrestling. Right? Can you train to gain power? Yes. Or is punching power 100% genetics? It's a lot of genetics, but you can absolutely gain power learning how to punch properly. O'Malley isn't the biggest guy, but can send guys' consciousness into the shadow realm. You can train it. You can train it. Luke, have you ever crop dusted a fighter or person you didn't like? I mean, just first class. That's it. I started watching, so if he's answered this, just ignore the question. What does it say that the UFC's attitude towards European fans that the Manchester pay-per-view is at U.S. times? That those fuckers will pay for it and say thanks and that they don't have to worry about it? And they're right? It's not a question of like, what does it say that the UFC does this? It's not the right question. The question is, what does it say that the UFC is right that they'll do it? Thoughts on UFC giving Mike Mallot, Gilbert Urbina for fight night? I don't have any. Ever had a UFO experience? Do you believe in aliens? So someone asked this many years ago. I am open to the idea that there are aliens. I'm open to the potential possibility in ways where I used to be very dismissive of that, but certainly in a broad and expansive universe, the mathematical certainty that there is some kind of alien life form, and to not even withstanding the bacteria that they found on meteorites and whatnot, but or I should say bacteria that they found on objects floating in space. So because of the meteorite, it would already be back on Earth, but of a non-human origin. But I don't think I've never had any kind of encounter. I've never had any ghost stories. I don't have any of that shit. So I'm not sure what to tell y'all. Last but not least, you should just go full platinum white hair and beard. Guys, I don't know if you can tell, but the gray is slowly eating. Like it's on its way. It's on its way, everyone. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. All right. Very good. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I know it's been a bit of a quieter week in combat sports, but I appreciate you guys here tuning in just the same. This podcast will be up tonight. And more stuff coming your way this weekend. I'm going to put on the podcast platform this and then this weekend two of the interviews that we did, the Ivan Flores, and then, of course, the Dan Hardy as well. So thanks to you guys for watching. I greatly appreciate it. You can always email me, lukethomasnews@gmail.com. And until next time,